everybody. My name is Ethan Sauers, and I am here to discuss week 1 of prize pick offerings for college fantasy football. It's exciting. We were able to rack up a nice little success rate for our week 0 contests, and hopefully rolling into week 1 already in the money. So we'll take a look here. It's a little bit later in the week just because of the way that they've staggered their releases, with the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday offerings this week. It's gotten a little bit crazy. And so I think that that's affected the overall schedule for when Prize Picks is releasing as well. So just something to keep in mind moving forward. Hopefully we'll be able to get things on a bit more consistent basis moving forward. But yeah, let's jump in. So the passing yard props, I'm mainly going to focus on Saturday for today because once we get this turned out to you guys, it's probably going to be pretty close to lock on Friday. So we'll stick with Saturday. A few of the interesting ones, I see JJ McCarthy right here against ECU at 211.5. I think that's an interesting line. It's a little bit subdued considering the competition. And I do think that Michigan is going to want to make sure that their passing attack is tuned in and ready to go. So if I were playing that one, I think the over is the one I like a little bit better. However, I think that there are some better plays on here, so that wouldn't necessarily be my top one to go after. We see Braden Shager, and he's actually a Friday line. So if you see this, know that there is some wind expected at that Hawaii and Stanford game. So that's a pretty reasonable number, but I think that they're baking in that wind into that total. We'll move on down here. Michael Penix Jr., 310.5. That seems pretty aggressive, but it should be a competitive game, and Washington will need to throw the ball. I'm a little bit bummed this Drake May line. They did drop a line early in the week that was 305.5 passing yards, where I was taking the under on that one. It has moved down significantly down to 275.5. It's to a place now where I almost like the over. But man, there are just so many question marks with that new offensive coordinator. I don't know if I trust it enough to put anything down on that yet. We've got Spencer Rattler at 251.5. I kind of like the over on that one. I'm going to get into one of his pass catchers later, but I do think that there's some value in that South Carolina passing game to be had. So I don't hate this 251.5 at all. That is definitely in play for me this week. We got Jordan Travis at 252.5 on his passing yards. I don't love that quite as much as the South Carolina line. So that's probably one I'm passing over. And then we got Jaden Daniels. Man, just such a wild card at quarterback. If he is able to get things done on the ground, that's probably going to be his priority. But knowing Florida State and knowing that they have a reputable defense, that's one that I'm not confident enough in to chase right now. We'll stick with the passing format here, and we'll jump over to passing touchdowns. I do think Joe Milton at 2.5 passing touchdowns is a very nice line against Virginia. I think Tennessee will have to throw the ball around quite a bit. I think that they'll want to get Milton acclimated with his new weapons. And I think that the touchdowns are what you can bank on. I'm not sure exactly what yardage is going to look like. Virginia's defense isn't anything I'm afraid of. So I think 2.5 touchdowns is very doable. Let's see what else. I don't love any of these other ones. Devin Leary at 2 is all right. But you have to wonder how much Ray Davis is going to eat on that Ball State defense. Jordan Travis, again, you've got the rushing upside for him, so that limits his passing touchdowns. Trey Benson also limits that touchdown equity a little bit. So I don't love that. Jaden Daniels at 1.5 passing touchdowns. I could be inclined to take that line. I think that LSU is going to need to pass the ball to win this game, essentially. So I'm okay with that Jaden Daniels line, but familiar trend, not really one that I'm all the way in on. And these are just for Friday. It looks like all these combo plays. So we'll switch over to some rushing props here. And let's see. So you've got the Michigan backs here against East Carolina. Blake Corum at 87.5 and Donovan Edwards at 73.5. I would take the 14-yard swing and lean Donovan Edwards over Blake Corum on this one. Both could easily have 100-yard games, but I do think that Michigan may be passing a little bit more this week. So I would take the lower line with Edwards. I think that he should have ample opportunity. And I think he's just has a better opportunity to break off a big one than Corum does. Ray Davis, very aggressively projected here at 93.5 rushing yards against Ball State. Man, it doesn't feel like one where you'd want to take the under because Ball State, is just such a step down for any SEC opponent. And I think Kentucky wants to run the ball. I think they know that that's the strength of their team, despite getting Devin Leary in at quarterback. I think Ray Davis is going to be featured pretty heavily here. Caleb Johnson at 86.5. My only hesitation with this, because I think that Iowa's running game is far and away the best unit in this matchup. Their offensive line against Utah State's defensive line. My hesitation with this is that with Cade McNamara likely out and Deacon Hill being the quarterback this week, how efficient is Iowa going to be? And does Utah State even have to respect the passing game? If they're able to load the box and put 8 guys in the box down after down, I don't think that, I won't go that far, but I think that it will strongly bring into question Caleb Johnson's role. We know that there's a little bit of a timeshare with him and LaShawn Williams. We're expecting less of a timeshare than last year, but I still think that timeshare will be there. So 86.5 seems kind of right on the money as far as what I'm considering out of Caleb this week. So just be aware of that situation. We've got Taylon Green, 30.5. That seems like a really nice line, but remember, passing or rushing yards count sacks in college football. So 30.5. I definitely think Taylon Green will have more rushes that accumulate for more than 30.5 yards, but I worry about how that game script is going to be. And if they're passing, at a higher frequency than they were in general last year, that does open Taylon Green up for a little bit more, a few more sacks. So definitely be considerate of that as well. Gianti and Halani with 44.5 and 52.5 rushing yard projections. They're interesting. If you're bullish on Boise, then that's the play, I think, is going with one of their rushing yard totals, because I do think that for them to keep pace, they will need to slow the game down and they will need to run the ball efficiently. It's a tough matchup for him this week. So keep that in mind, but know that if you're bullish on Boise and you think that they have a shot at winning this game, I would focus my picks here on their ground game. And then we see a few more here. I don't love many of these, but the first option that I'm going to lock in as one that I really like this week is going to be Austin Jones. 50.5 rushing yards. So last week he carried the ball for 6 times and ran for 56 yards and 2 touchdowns. The efficiency I don't think is going to be there necessarily, especially the touchdowns. But I do like his opportunity to run the ball at a little bit more volume this week. Nevada is a worse offense and shouldn't force USC to pass the ball as much as they did last week. So I think Austin Jones and Marshawn Lloyd are both going to get fed for the most part this week. It will be interesting to see how that breakdown is handled, but I do think that that kind of plays to your advantage because I think Lincoln wants to figure out who their running back one is going to be essentially for the rest of the year. And so I think this is a great opportunity for them to do it. Obviously, with USC, you want to consider the fact that Caleb could be showcased, pump those numbers up for his Heisman campaign again, his repeat campaign. But I would lean on the running backs here if I had to make a play. And I do really like that Austin Jones rushing yard prop. Take a look at the rushing touchdowns. Again, I mentioned Austin Jones. I don't know about the touchdown upside necessarily for him. They've got so many weapons, so many different options on who can score touchdowns in this offense. I don't want to have to deal with trying to figure out what kind of variance is going to be at hand against Nevada. So I would play the rushing yards over that rushing touchdown line. But if this rushing yard line moves, that touchdown isn't a bad play. We know they're going to put up bunches and bunches of points. So Trey Benson coming in at 0.5 rushing touchdowns as well. I'm not big on Benson. I'm a little bit bearish on him in general for his season outlook. I think that Florida State has so many options now. They've increased their weapons tremendously, and they've done a great job at stacking talent on that team. Down close to the goal line, I mean, you've got Benson. I know Toafili's a smaller back, but I mean, he's in play as well. You've got Jaheim Bell now, who's going to be used as an H-back and probably get some goal line carries. Then you have Jordan Travis as well. Just plenty of options. And that's just to say those are 4 names only if they run the ball. If they pass the ball, you're opening yourself up to a lot more variance with all of their wide receiver talent as well. So don't really love the touchdown lines. I've mentioned before, I try and stay away from the touchdown lines as much as possible. This week, I do like a lot of the yardage props, and I do like a few of the fantasy score props as well. So we'll touch on those here moving forward. I'm going to transition over to receivers and the receiving yard lines that they've got drawn up for us this week. This is where the majority of my plays are coming from. I think that there is a solid opportunity to find some value here, especially in some of the more high-profile games. The first guy who we see here for Saturday is Brew McCoy. No, Chris K loves himself some Brew. This week, though, against Virginia, I question how involved he will be because I think that Virginia's defense is so leaky that the explosive playmakers are the ones that have the higher upside and the ones that could definitely eat in. Now, Tennessee has the ability to put up, 400 yards passing and have every single one of their top 4 receivers hit this prop. So that is the risk that you're running with going after a high-profile offense. But with Brew, you've got Dante Thornton, you've got Ramel Keaton, you've got Squirrel White as just other options that can be profiled and can be featured in this game. And I don't think that Brew has the big play potential that other ones have to where I feel like this is a little bit safer than, say, going after an under on Squirrel White or Dante Thornton. So just my 2 cents on that. But I do really like Brew in this opportunity. Last year, just by the way, using that Campus to Canton prop tool, if you plug in Brew McCoy last year and you put in that 63.5 receiving yards, he only hit that line in 3 games last year. Now, I know you're saying Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt were on that team, but I don't think there's really much more clarity to this wide receiver team. I don't think Brew has made that next step up to put himself in the position where they were last year. And I think instead you just have more mouths to feed, and his volume may increase a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be a huge step forward like some might hope. Some other lines here. Luke Shea at 30.5 receiving yards. Again, if McNamara was in, I think this would be a lot higher and a lot more of an aggressive line. With Deacon Hill, I don't hate the line. I think that it's still in play. It's not one that I'm chasing. I just can't find myself to play the 3rd string Iowa quarterback. I just don't have that intestinal fortitude, unfortunately. So going down here as well, we've got Roma Dunze, Jalen McMillan, 79 and 69.5 receiving yards. I would be more interested in this Jalen Polk line, 47.5 receiving yards. I think he's got a decent opportunity. I know that Boise is going to focus their attention on the main two, on Odunze and McMillan. Polk always is going to have that opportunity to go a little bit under the radar. And, getting a price that's, 2/3 of what McMillan's yardage is and almost half of what Odunze's yardage prop is. I do think that Polk is the better value between those guys. Some Boise guys with some low receiving yard options here. Okay, this is we're gonna hit the home stretch with 3 plays here that I really like. Xavier Worthy, 63.5 receiving yards. I really like that option. I'm gonna get to his fantasy score potential in just a little bit. I like the fantasy scoring potential a bit more than this yardage prop, but I still really like the receiving yards. 63.5. I think that Texas is going to try and get this offense in rhythm, especially between Ewers and Worthy, add Mitchell, Isaiah Nayor, maybe some Jonte Cook. I think that they want their passing attack focused at a high level, and knowing that they have Alabama right around the corner. I mean, this is when they're going to do it against Rice. So I definitely appreciate that line. I think that there's value there. Antoine Wales Jr., Juice Wales for South Carolina, coming in at 56.5 receiving yards. I will be taking the over on this all day long. I know South Carolina is a bit unpredictable, a bit volatile, especially Spencer Rattler. You don't know what kind of a day he's going to have. But against a UNC defense that was 111th against the pass last year, man, I really like Wells' opportunity here. I think that they should be slinging that ball around, trying to keep pace with UNC. Rivalry game, so I think there's a lot of juice with this line as well. I think that there's plenty to squeeze with Juice well. Next, Johnny Wilson. I am going to be taking the under on Johnny Wilson this week. 66.5 receiving yards. A few factors. This is a little bit similar to Brew McCoy and me explaining why I was down on Brew McCoy this week. Johnny Wilson has a lot of incoming talent that he will be competing with, specifically talent that almost makes his role a little bit redundant. Wilson's a big body. He got a lot of red zone options and a lot of inside work because he was essentially functioning like a tight end last year. In a lot of situations, that wasn't his only role, but he definitely was that big body over the middle to kind of gain some leverage. This year, they have Kyle Morlock, who's coming in as a big FCS transfer, and we have Jaheim Bell. So 2 tight ends that are listed on the starting lineup. They list 2 tight ends in their starting lineup. Does make me think that we'll see a bit of 11 personnel with them both in the game. So I think that his role there is a little bit infringed upon. And then also adding Keon Coleman as well. Coleman, a very talented receiver. I know that Wilson should have some rapport with Travis, but I do think that he is the more likely guy to get the stronger coverage against LSU and to have coverage slanted his way a little bit more. Keon Coleman is a burner, just like Wilson. He can make the big play happen. So really, I mean, just a few factors all kind of stacking against each other for Johnny Wilson. Don't love that when looking at his 66.5 yard line. But, this is a game that could be a shootout. So there's always a possibility that the over hits, but I'm pretty secure taking that 66.5 line here. Swap over to rushing touchdowns. Brew McCoy is the only one that they have currently posted. 0.5 receiving touchdowns. I mentioned earlier, I do like McCoy as that touchdown upside. I think he's got the best touchdown upside of the 4 receivers. But I just like I said, I don't feel super comfortable going after the touchdowns. Chasing touchdowns is a fool's errand, it seems sometimes. So we will switch over to our last section here on fantasy score. I did mention that I was looking at Xavier Worthy's fantasy score, so we'll start there. Xavier Worthy coming in at 13.5. So I would take the more on that one. I think that is a nice line. It's the kind of line where you're expecting him to score a touchdown for him to hit it, but it's also one that, even if he has an explosive game and doesn't find the end zone, he still has the opportunity to hit that. So those are the kind of things that I look for when I'm looking for a fantasy score to try and capitalize on. I'm looking for one with a guy who has some touchdown upside that is definitely in play to get in the end zone, but a score that doesn't necessitate him. A guy who, if he hits his ceiling yardage-wise, would still be able to clear that without a touchdown. Those are the kind of plays that I really look for in terms of fantasy points. Caleb Johnson, 16.5. I like this a lot better when McNamara was in because the efficiency of that offense, I don't know how many touchdown opportunities they'll have. And with 16.5, for him just to get that on groundwork alone with no touchdowns, you're looking at him needing to go 165 yards just to break even. Now, that being said, I do think Iowa will score a touchdown or two even without McNamara, and I think Johnson's the likely guy to get it. But just factors that are kind of leaning that way that I don't love. Juice Wells, 12.5. This is very similar to the Worthy line in the fact that, with a ceiling game from Wells, he could get this on yardage alone with yardage and reception points. So I do like the fantasy score probably equally as this 56.5 receiving yards. It's pick your poison there. I went with receiving yards, but fantasy score easily in play. And this is my bonus pick for you guys here. Just before we peace out, DeCarrion Joyner, South Carolina's running back, 10.5 is his projected fantasy score. I like the over quite a bit on this one. Joyner is a guy who hasn't seen a ton of action, but he's got that wide receiver running back hybrid role from Fantrax. And so I am assuming that he's got some chops in the passing game as well. 10.5, if you're catching passes out of the backfield and the primary running back, 10.5 is such an easy number to hit. So he's another guy that I like throwing in my ticket lineups here. But overall, I do think that this is a little bit of a weaker offering than PrizePick offered last week, just because they've had more time to formulate their plan as there's been more games. And it's a little bit harder of an offering to kind of comb through because there are so many games. But I think that we've done a great job finding some value here. I think that some of these plays definitely have the opportunity to make you some profit this week. But just in general, I think that this week one offering is just such an exciting slate. Finally getting a chance to jump back in and talk football with you guys has been a ton of fun. If you have any questions or any feedback for me, let me know in the Discord. But I am very, very excited for some more football this week, guys. Pace yourself. Enjoy the offerings. We got a whole weekend of football. So see you later, guys.